Well, good morning. This is a special year for TV6. As you may have heard, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary. This morning, we're going to take a look back and share some memories with someone who wasn't here at the very beginning, but was definitely here in the early days. And today we'll also have an update on an event that's become a TV6 tradition of service. It all starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
You know, our first guest this morning has been part of the Upper Peninsula TV scene for over half a century. Bruce Turner began the Upper Peninsula phase of his broadcasting career here at TV6 and then went on to a long record of service, which continues today at WNMU Public TV 13. Bruce has been a very involved observer of television in Upper Michigan almost from the beginning. Today we're going to reminisce a little about the early days of TV6 as well as what's happened since then. Bruce, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
Well, Don, it's good. We did this, what, 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
Yes.
Welcome back to the TV6 studios as well.
I'm always impressed by the changes, and as you pointed them out to me this morning, I can't believe the number of people and news cars that are in the newsroom.
You know, we could talk about that back when you and I were there. In fact, we will. But first, you know, before we get there, how did you get into broadcasting to begin with?
Well, I started out in high school in Sturgis, Michigan. I was in my junior year at Sturgis High School, and I was working part-time in a general business course that you got credit for at a jewelry store. Managed by a fellow who happened to have a real strong southern accent in a northern town. And it so happens that we were doing advertising on WSTR, the local station. And one day the manager of the station came in his southern drawl and said, well, got a new copy for me? And my boss was saying, yes, but I wish there was somebody else to read it because I think Bruce could do a better job than you're doing. Well, that was my introduction to getting a test to go out and do a radio show. And so during my junior year, I was a disc jockey and country music as well. They call me Shoeless Bruce.
All right.
This is a small station.
Sure.
But from that, I went to several other stations and then eventually ended up here.
Had you ever thought about radio before that happened?
No, not in a heartbeat.
Okay. And how about television? What was your first stop in television?
Well, it started because when I moved to Marinette, Menominee, being hired by the company that bought Channel 6, they had purchased WMAM radio, but also included Channel 11, which eventually became WLUK. So even though I was hired as a radio announcer, I was able to do some work on WLUK in Marinette, Menominee. It wasn't called LUK at the time. And then from that point on, the same company bought from Frank Russell Enterprises Channel 6. And in this business, if you want to make a success, you think about going south. Green Bay, Chicago, New York, all of that. I wanted to go north for other reasons. And as a result, it wasn't hard to find someone, and his name was Chuck Ramsey. Chuck was working at Channel 6 as a weatherman. And the opportunity to move to Green Bay, that was ideal for him. So he moved there and spent many years, I think at WBAY. Right.
Very successful career in Green Bay.
Yes, and I spent many years up here.
So you actually started doing the weather here on TV6?
I was the weatherman. But nowhere near the caliber of Carl Bonek.
Well, we didn't have any other kind of equipment they have now either.
Well, we had chalk and some very handmade visuals that we used. So it was a different time.
But you eventually moved into news?
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I was a few years after you, but it's so different from today. You know, as you mentioned, for example, now we have 28 people in the news department. What did you have back then?
Me?
Yeah, right.
Well, at the time that I took over the news department, it was basically me, and we had a camera person. So when they said film at 11, that meant film at 11, which you no longer deal with. And Bruce Sari was one of the people that I worked with as the photographer. And so we went many places in one vehicle, not the fleet that you've got.
You know, and when you think about it, television is a visual media. But in those days in the news, most of the visual was a guy sitting behind the desk reading the news to you.
Yes. Or with graphics that had been prepared by the graphic artist.
Right.
And one of the earliest graphic artists at Channel 6 was Gene Sinerval.
Right, right.
Who's long since passed away, but was a wonderful person to work with and a very skilled artist.
One of the other things that back in those days too is there was no such thing as a teleprompter that we could use.
That's true. We had the handmade device where you took a roll of paper and wrote on it with magic marker, and then it was cranked, or if you got desperate, somebody came in and put it over their hand and pulled it.
Right.
And it had some unusual consequences.
But that was seldom used on a newscast. That was more probably for commercials and things.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, that was only used for commercials. On the news, you basically took what you had written and what you pulled off of the AP or United Press. I can't remember which one we had at that time.
Right. And that was one of the techniques we had to learn in those days, to be able to read the script without constantly looking down at it, but be able to look up at the camera and the viewers as well.
Yes.
So, okay, we've got to take a break. I'll be back with more in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this commercial break. Again, our guest this morning is Bruce Turner, veteran Upper Peninsula broadcaster, career going back to the early days of TV6. And we're reminiscing about some of those days. You know, Bruce, back then it was black and white.
Yes.
And people were probably watching on a screen that was 21 inches or smaller.
Right. And I don't remember captions back then.
No.
And I don't remember stereo back then. That was a later thing to come along.
Right. You know, there's a kind of a classic story with you being on the set when there was kind of an accident. You want to tell us that story?
Well, in the older version of your Channel 6 studio, I'm impressed by all the things around here. We had a flat, which was basically 4 by 8 feet, and it was with a large picture of the state capitol.
Okay.
And it was just made to sit in behind me.
You would be sitting back here?
Yeah, back there.
Right.
Except that it wasn't secured very well. So one night they gave me the cue to stand by, and before they could give me the cue to go on, the flat fell on me. And fortunately it wasn't that heavy, but there I am trying to get the crew to get the flat off of me. They got it off of me and they said, "You're on." And I can't remember what the first story was, but you know, you don't normally start a story with a happy thing. No, but right. I was laughing.
Yeah, couldn't help it. You know, we have to mention that after you left TV6, which was 1963,
63, May.
You really did pioneer public television in the Upper Peninsula.
Well, yes, because even though Public TV 13 didn't officially go on the air until 1972 in December, in 1963 when I joined it, there were 2 other full-time people, Dr. Kenneth Bergsma, who was the director, and John Major, who was the technical director. And I came on board as the production manager.
Okay.
And so I ended up doing a lot of the producing of the programs and even physically building sets. And what we did in the old Lee Hall Ballroom on Northern's campus was construct a TV studio, a control room, a radio studio, and we were able to do everything a TV station does, except we didn't broadcast. We put it out over an interconnected system that brought in 33 communities in the UP by microwave and by community antenna. And as a result, we're at one time the largest closed circuit system in the United States.
Really? So as I say, you really were the pioneer of public broadcasting in the Upper Peninsula.
Right.
You know, one of the things that's really changed that amazes me is the fact that, you know, when I was here, there was no way you could do a remote broadcast. And nowadays, our morning crew can go out and do it almost anywhere. But one of the things that I recall, and perhaps you will, is we did a joint undertaking between TV6 and WNMU to broadcast the regional basketball tournament.
Yes, yes. I don't remember many details about it, but I do remember we've had several cooperative ventures, and they were always technically complex. I mean, it wasn't easy like it is today.
Right. We had no way to get the signal to our transmitter.
Right.
You did, being on the campus, and we could pick the signal up off the air, so it was a joint broadcast. In fact, I was on the air with those broadcasts.
Yeah.
Glenn Brown was the color commentator, the Northern basketball coach.
Yes.
What what do you say? What amazes you most about what's changed, or is it possible to bring it down to that?
I think today, if I were doing news again, it's so different with the instant communication with the internet, the Twitter and all of that, where a person gets overwhelmed by things. Right. I don't know how a person could sort out what is truth from what appears to be truth. And so I think the fact that you've got a news department where you can kind of vet things, make sure that you've got the full story or as much as possible, that's one of the things we didn't have back then, and right. one of the complexities of life in the news department now.
And it's kind of interesting how technology moves so rapidly. You mentioned film. You know, we went to videotape, and now we've gone past that.
Well, not only videotape, but when I first went to Northern, we were using Ampex 660 tapes. They were videotapes that were 2 inches right. wide. And then we went to 3/4 inch, or 1 inch, and then 3/4 inch, and then it got down to 1/2 inch. I mean, all of this was a change in the state of the art, and new machines had to be bought for it. So it was hard to stay state of the art.
It certainly is. You know, and in commercial broadcasting now, and we have less than a minute, but you know, now we have companies like Netflix and Amazon and people producing programming. I don't know how that's affecting public television, but it obviously is affecting cable systems and a lot of other delivery of TV systems.
We have locally people that will come in with programs that they have produced, and in some cases they are good enough that with a little extra work we can maneuver them into a program that we're proud to put on the air. Right. But we also have PBS programs that take independent work and put it into a series. But yes, it's amazing what people can do with their camera phones right. and sound that just wasn't available.
And of course, the one thing that keeps the local station important and local is the fact that it does local programming, yes. including in public television.
High School Bowl is one of our most popular programs, brings kids in from all over the UP and part of Wisconsin.
Well, we have to do this again, Bruce. We just have maybe come
Next
back
10
on
years?
Maybe the 75th. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much for coming
You're
in
welcome.
this morning. Our guest has been Bruce Turner. We'll be back to talk about another important event coming up after we take this break. Well, our next guest this morning is the manager of creative services here at TV6. Scott Zerbel could also share a lot of TV6 memories, but we've asked him to join us this morning to talk about a very special current project here at TV6. Scott, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Well, thanks for having me, Don.
And just so people know, you're the person who's in charge of making local commercials here at TV6.
Yeah, I've been doing that for the past 11 years. I started behind one of the cameras in the studio here back in 1984 and worked in the programming department and became local program manager, and then spent a year in the news department, and then about 10 years in marketing, and now the last 10, 11 years in creative services.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yep, it kind of keeps life interesting.
So we could talk about a lot of TV6 memories, but what we're really here to talk about today is the memory of a continuing event called the Canathon.
Yep, the Canathon is going to be kicking off next month. This will be our 35th annual event. Began back in 1982. Actually, our former news director, Ed Carney, kind of came up with the idea. He had saw an article in a trade magazine and went to the general manager at the time and said, you know, that's something we should probably try. It was a food drive in a local community another television station was doing, so he kind of spearheaded it. And
as I recall, thinking back, that was a time when there were some heavy layoffs in the mining industry, a lot of things going on.
Correct, and that was the timing for it. The layoffs at the mines here locally had kind of taxed the local food pantries, so he came up with this idea, and that first year they collected 700 pounds of food here in Marquette County.
700 pounds?
Yep, 700.
You think they thought that it would be a continuing event?
I'm not sure as far as, but each year it kept going and kept growing, and and again, 35 years later, here we go.
And you've been in charge for a number of years
since
now?
1990.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is not, it's the TV6 Canathon, but we got a lot of help to make this happen, don't we? From a lot of partners, a lot of supporters.
Yeah, and when I took it over in 1990, one of the things that we wanted to try to do, as a station, is to take it out and make it a true UP-wide event. So I enlisted the assistance of reached out to radio stations, and a number of radio stations came on board. And since then, that kind of has changed a little bit as far as who's been involved. But but the last probably 10 years or so, we've had the same radio stations up in the Keweenaw, Ontonagon County, Gogebic County, down in Iron Mountain, or in Dickinson County, Delta County, and also over in Munising. Actually, in Munising, it's the Munising News, Willie Peterson, who gives us help over there.
Okay, and a lot of these places run special events, special activities.
Well, it's just, you know, it's organized on a local. They kind of organize things on a local level. We oversee the umbrella event, you know, and in each community, there's kind of different things that go on. Primarily, there's collection through schools and as well as drop-off points, but there are some special collections that go on. One of the first ones every year is the traditional steel workers from the mines. They do a collection in the west end of Marquette County in the local schools, and they throw a pizza party for the class that collects the most. But that'll be kicking off right towards the end of October, and actually we'll wrap up before we officially kick off our event.
And I think a lot of the kids in schools, in different school systems, enjoy getting involved, don't they?
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting, but I guess on another level, it's kind of sad that, you know, there's some people that grew up with the Canathon. It's always been part of their life. I mean, my kids, as an example, when they were in preschool and grade school and junior high and everything up even through college, you know, have been involved with the Canathon. So, you know, it's a great event. It's a, you know, it is great from this perspective, at least from my perspective, that that everything stays local. Everything, you know, if something's collected in Escanaba, it stays there, Iron Mountain, and so forth. So, and that's kind of like I think the beauty of it is that, you know, even though it's umbrella, it's based out of here as far as what we do with the promotion and organization of the event, but all the food that's collected stays and goes to the local food pantries.
And how much food have we collected over these years?
Well, after last year's event, it's 3.44 million pounds.
Wow.
Since the beginning. Last year we had 133,700 pounds was collected UP-wide last year.
And of course, the real reason for the success is the people who contribute.
Yeah, and that's just it. And the nice thing about it is that it reaches out so far, and we try to make it as easy as possible for someone to make a donation. And, you know, I mean, I would say it's great if someone gives us a truckload, but it's great if someone gives us a couple of cans. I mean, it really all adds up, and you know, and it does go to a great cause, and the food pantries greatly appreciate it.
We have only about 30 seconds left. When is the wrap-up event?
Well, the event kicks off on Monday, November the 14th, wraps up on Wednesday, December the 7th. We'll have a live commercial-free program from 7 to 8 o'clock that evening here on TV6. The News Tonight will not be seen that night, so we can kind of talk to all the people that helped out.
So we have to collect a lot of food again this year.
I hope that happens.
Okay, thanks for coming in and talking about it with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it, Scott. I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Well, today has been a day for reminiscing, so we'll continue on that track. You know, as we get older, there's a tendency for some of us to want to talk about how things used to be. And since I'm one of those people, let me tell you this story. As I was looking to buy a new car recently, I was sharing with my family and anyone else who would listen that cars didn't always come with the conveniences they have today. And I'm not looking back to the days of the Model T. I'm talking about the 1950s, when most families had a car and people had a lot of brands and models to choose from. But they didn't provide everything they offer today. For example, cars didn't always come with a radio. On many models, that was just an option. And we're talking about AM radio. FM came along much later. Of course, they didn't have CD or tape players because that technology hadn't even arrived yet. And it would be pretty difficult to make an old-fashioned record player with a needle and spinning disc work in a moving vehicle. But that was just one of many differences. Today, the vast majority of new cars come with factory-installed air conditioning, but it wasn't always that way. As some of you will remember, there was a time when your choice on a trip were to swelter in the car or drive with the windows wide open with the wind roaring through the car, making it very difficult for conversation or anything else. Even after it was introduced in cars, only the higher-end models came with air. For cars not equipped with factory air, dealer-installed under-dash units were popular. But eventually it began to change, and by 1969, more than half of all new cars sold were equipped with AC. I could go on down the list and cite a lot of other changes. Windows didn't always go up and down with a push of a button. We used to have to turn a crank to make that happen. That may still be true in a few models. We also didn't have heated seats, and some of the early cars' heaters and defrosters actually didn't always work that well. And how about remote starting your car? There was a time if you told someone that one day you could start your car from in the house, they would have said, right, yeah, when pigs fly. Now cars come with built-in navigation systems, devices that warn you if you're drifting off the road or over the center line, backup cameras, and warning systems that tell you when someone or something is approaching from the rear. We have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. The list goes on. No question it's pretty different from the days when I bought my first car, a 1954 Plymouth stick shift without any of the features I just talked about. But it got me where I wanted to go. It was great. Now we're heading down the road, no pun intended, to self-driving cars. Pretty hard for a lot of us to imagine. But like so many things, you don't want to get that introductory model. Wait until they get the bugs worked out. For me, I'm going to wait until they invent a car you can send out on its own to pick up something at the grocery store. That will be something worth waiting for. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Thanks to Bruce Turner for joining us this morning so we could share some TV memories here in our 60th anniversary year. And thanks as well to Scott Zerbel for coming in to let us know what's happening with a TV6 tradition known as the Canathon. The Canathon has done great things for many years, but it only works because of your support. If you want to check us out on the internet, you can find us at uppermichigansource.com. The most recent show usually available on Monday afternoon. The Today Show is all lined up and ready to roll. Thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.